up on this Friday edition of Newsline at noon. Officials from South and North Korea are meeting at the truce village of Panmunjom as they look to arrange the first reunion in 3 years for families separated since the Korean War. Korea's multi-purpose satellite, the Arirang 5, makes contact with a ground station in central Korea after blasting off from a launch site in Russia. A special radar attached to the satellite will allow Korea to observe the Earth's surface at night and under any weather condition. Plus, the UN Secretary-General is calling for a prompt investigation into the latest allegation of chemical attacks by the Syrian military. France says the world should intervene militarily if it's confirmed the Assad regime used chemical agents against civilians. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
Where's the best place for bibimbap?
Les Jeux Olympiques d'hiver se dérouleront-ils à Pyeongchang?
هل أنتم حقاً سابع أكبر مصدر في العالم؟
この歌手は誰ですか？你好，最近哪部电视剧的人气最旺？
Korea is attracting interest from around the world. The more you know, the more you want to know. Dynamic Korea.
Thanks for joining us. You're watching Newsline at noon. I'm Choi Yuson here in Seoul.
Good to have you with us. I'm Mark Brew, and we kick off this newscast with the latest round of talks between the Koreas. Red Cross officials from South and North Korea are currently at the truce village of Panmunjom to discuss the issue of resuming reunions for families separated since the Korean War.
And for more details, we are going to connect live to our Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sung-hee. Sung-hee, what's the latest?
Busan officials began their talks at around 10 a.m. on this Friday morning and talked for about 40 minutes before taking a break. Now, the chief delegates from the two sides have begun private discussions from about 11:25 a.m. Now, opening the talks, the South Korean chief delegate expressed hopes for a fruitful meeting today, while the North Korean chief delegate said that today's meeting could be an opportunity for untangling inter-Korean relations. During the morning session, the two sides exchanged their basic stances. An official at the Unification Ministry said while they agreed on holding reunions as well as video reunions for the separated families, the two Koreas did show differences on various fronts. Thousands of Korean families were left separated since the Korean War in the 1950s, and the ministry estimates that around 80% of the 73,000 registered separated family members in the South are over the age of 70. The last round of reunions took place in October of 2010.
So, Sung-hee, what are some of the issues to be discussed at today's meeting?
Well, the officials will start with technical things like the scale, the date, and the venue of the talks. Now, for now, Seoul is aiming to hold the meeting in the middle of next month to coincide with Chuseok, or Korean Thanksgiving holiday, as mentioned by President Park Geun-hye in her Liberation Day speech. Some possible locations for the meeting are Mount Kumgang, Seoul, and Pyongyang, although the most likely venue is Mount Kumgang as proposed by North Korea earlier this week. Now, this is where the last round of reunions took place. The Unification Ministry said it will put a priority on reuniting as many aging family members as possible, so we are expecting the reunion to be much larger than the previous ones, which included some 100 family members from each side. Seoul also proposed the idea of holding family reunions on a regular basis and allowing family members to exchange letters. The two sides are not expected to bring up the issue of restarting South Korean tours to Mount Kumgang at today's meeting. North Korea proposed yesterday to meet for separate talks on the issue later this month or at the beginning of September, and we are still waiting for Seoul's answer to the North's proposal. Guys?
Okay, thank you very much, Sung-hee. Hopefully they make some positive developments there. That was our Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sung-hee with the latest on the inter-Korean talks for resuming family reunions. Now, the president of the International Committee of the Red Cross, Peter Maurer, reportedly met with North Korea's ceremonial leader Kim Young-nam in Pyongyang on Thursday.
The North Korean Central News Agency reports that Maurer gave Kim a present that is to be delivered to regime leader Kim Jong-un, but there was no mention of what was discussed. Maurer had earlier expressed hopes to kickstart reunions of Korean families separated since the Korean War. Maurer is scheduled to depart North Korea on this Friday and stop over in Beijing for a short stay before coming to Seoul next week for talks with President Park Geun-hye. A North Korean man has defected to South Korea through the waters off the South's west coast early Friday. The man was found almost completely nude on Kyodong Island near the port city of Incheon around 3:40 a.m., and local residents reported the incident. Authorities are currently questioning the man about his motivation for defecting to the south. Officials believe the man swam across the maritime border to the western island, which is located about 20 kilometers south of the 38th parallel. South Korea's fourth multi-purpose satellite, the Arirang 5, has been successfully launched into space. The latest addition to the country's satellite series will provide some comprehensive observation data for Korea, enabling high definition for monitoring at any time under any weather conditions. Our Song Ji-sun has the details.
Korea's multi-purpose satellite, Arirang 5, has continually confirmed its successful deployment into its target orbit. The satellite was launched at 11:39 p.m. Thursday night Korea time at Russia's Yasny site in Russia's Dnepr rocket and separated from its fairing and carrier as scheduled. Its first beacon signals were initially picked up by the Troll satellite station in Antarctica 32 minutes following the launch, and at 5:35 a.m. Friday morning Korea time, about 6 hours after blastoff, Arirang 5 made contact with Daejeon's ground station of Korea Aerospace Research Institute. The most notable feature of this latest satellite is its SAR, short for synthetic aperture radar, that can observe and photograph the Earth's surface at any time, regardless of weather conditions.
Arirang 5 emits microwaves that will be reflected after reaching the Earth's surface. That data enable us to obtain three-dimensional images with accurate figures.
After 6 months of adjusting its orbit and testing its assigned tasks, Arirang 5 will orbit the Earth at an average altitude of 550 kilometers, monitoring the ocean, the environment, and natural disasters, along with its predecessors, the Arirang 2 and 3 satellites. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
More bad news for young Koreans and the population in general, as data shows job creation in Korea is gradually losing momentum. A report released by the Bank of Korea Friday shows that export-induced employment coefficient, or the number of jobs created per 1 billion won, or roughly $900,000 of exports, was 7.3 in 2011, 3.5 less than in 2005. The average employment coefficient, including consumption, investment and exports, also decreased from 16 jobs to 12 jobs over the same period. Analysts say job creation was relatively lower among export industries, as they tend to mostly depend on non-manual labor in production and hire cheaper labor overseas. Korea's largest automaker, Hyundai Motor, is in a spot of bother as the company's striking union members and management failed to reach a compromise Thursday over wage and benefit issues. Hwang Ji-ae reports on how the automaker expects at least 2 more days of work stoppages.
Officials from Korea's largest car maker, Hyundai Motor, and its union members sat at the negotiating table on Thursday but failed to narrow their differences. The negotiations came after a partial strike of the labor union over unmet demands for higher wages and fringe benefits. The work stoppages have cost the automaker around $75 million in lost output this week alone, and more work stoppages are planned for Friday and Monday, meaning more losses. At a time when the Korean automaker is losing ground even at home to foreign brands because of free trade deals, experts say Hyundai faces major challenges ahead.
The production shortfall caused by the ongoing labor strike in Hyundai's Korean factories in the first half of this year had a negative impact on the company's exports. With another round of strikes taking place in the second half, the automaker will face difficulties in meeting overseas demand.
Hyundai's data shows that it takes around 30 hours to produce one vehicle in domestic factories, whereas in the U.S. it takes half that. The situation is not all that different in Chinese and Czech factories. In the event of a prolonged work stoppage, Hyundai says that it could raise its output in overseas factories that are already rolling out more than 60% of its automobiles.
If the union members continue to lay down their tools, we have to set up long-term countermeasures to tide us over, like operating overseas factories at full capacity.
Hyundai Motor and its labor union have a long history of conflict, with labor disputes becoming almost an annual event in the past 2 decades. Many say how the company deals with these issues could have a major impact on whether the automaker will be able to keep its competitive edge in the global market. 홍지혜, Arirang News.
The uncertainty over the U.S. Federal Reserve's timeline for tapering off its massive monetary stimulus program has rocked global markets for the past few months, but the Korean economy seems to be weathering the storm better than others. Our Kim Ji-yeon tells us why.
The Korean economy seems to be in better shape compared to some other global economies, despite speculations of a looming financial crisis due to expectations that the U.S. Fed's pullback from its monetary easing is not far off. Emerging economies such as India, Indonesia, Brazil, and Turkey have seen a rapid outflow of foreign capital. The value of currencies in those countries have also been hitting rock bottom, but this is not the case in Korea. Data show that the country's foreign currency reserves have steadily increased, with only relatively mild drops in the stock market.
We're actually in a fairly safe place if we look only at the numbers.
Korea's foreign reserve was at $330 billion as of July, which is a 40% increase compared to 2008, according to the Bank of Korea. The benchmark index KOSPI did fall slightly by 1.4% so far this month, but not as significantly as other markets, such as Indonesia's main index, which fell by 9.4% in August compared to a month earlier. The Korean currency fell a mere 0.2% against the US dollar in August, while the Indian rupee tumbled 4.2% and the Indonesian rupiah dropped 3.8%. Experts in Seoul go as far as saying the upcoming crisis for other emerging economies may become an opportunity for Korea, as foreigners are increasingly seeing Korea as a safe haven. But they do say that the Korean government needs to do more to set the country apart.
The government has to run a very careful policy. It has to emphasize that Korea is different, Korea is prepared, but also Korea cannot be seen to be panicking.
The Korean Ministry of Strategy and Finance announced this week that it has a contingency plan to swiftly deal with risks in its market. The ministry vowed to strengthen its monitoring on the market situation of Korea and abroad. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Business surveys show that the world economy is showing signs of recovery, with better than expected business growth in Europe, a rebound in China's large manufacturing sector, as well as improved employment figures from the United States. Our Yudian reports.
New business data shows the world economy is finally picking up steam. The United States, which is an important anchor for growth across the globe, saw its manufacturing expand in August at its fastest pace in 5 months. Claims for unemployment insurance, meanwhile, stood at a 6-year low, according to financial firm Market. Over in Europe, Market said business activity across the Eurozone picked up at a faster pace than expected, putting the Flash Composite Purchasing Managers Index in August at over 51. A reading over 50 indicates expansion. This was also the highest index recorded since mid-2011. Market also said Eurozone's largest economy, Germany, saw its business activity grow at the fastest pace in 7 months. Moving on over to China, the world's second largest economy, the index there rose to a 4-month high of 50.1 from July's reading of 47.7, showing moderate growth. Emerging countries, however, face a bleak economic outlook as speculation that the U.S. Federal Reserve will slow its asset purchases has triggered a foreign capital pullout. But economists say the rebound in Europe and the United States, along with more stability in China's economy, will support overall global growth. Yurian, Arirang News.
For your fill of Korean and international news. Join Chae Yu-sun and Mark Broom every weekday at lunchtime. Newsline at noon.
Plenary session this Wednesday and vote on the government restructuring bills.
Trying to make sense of the horrifying video footage and clarify the situation, world powers are formulating a response to the Syrian government's alleged use of chemical weapons against its own people. The United Nations and several Western countries are calling for a comprehensive probe to be launched right away. Our Ji Myung-gil reports.
Details about what exactly happened remain murky, but Syrian activists claim these people lying lifeless on the ground were the victims of a gas attack carried out Wednesday by Syrian government forces near the capital, Damascus. France's foreign minister says that if the Bashar al-Assad's regime is proven to have used chemical weapons against its own people, the international community has to respond with force.
There would have to be reaction with force in Syria from the international community, but there is no question of sending troops on the ground.
The deputy spokesperson for UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon said Thursday that the attacks needed to be probed without delay.
The Secretary-General remains deeply troubled by the reports of the alleged use of chemical weapons in Syria. The Secretary-General believes that the incidents reported yesterday need to be investigated without delay.
A top UN official has been dispatched to Syria to seek permission for UN investigators to visit the Damascus suburbs that were allegedly attacked. It remains unclear whether the Syrian government will give the inspectors who are already in Syria access to the sites. The U.S. is unable to say whether chemical weapons were used in the alleged attacks, and it is trying to figure out through its own intelligence sources.
At this time, right now, we are unable to conclusively determine CW use.
The Obama administration has said any U.S. response must await confirmation of the attacks. Russia and China has called for a thorough investigation into the attack, adding that the UN chemical weapons inspectors should fully consult with the Syrian government. Syrian activists claim more than 1,300 people were killed in Wednesday's attack. If proven, it would be the world's most deadly chemical weapons attack since the 1980s. The Syrian government continues to deny the army used chemical weapons. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Egypt's ex-president Hosni Mubarak has been released from prison and transported by helicopter to a military hospital in Cairo. The 85-year-old, who led Egypt with an iron fist for 3 decades, is later expected to be put under house arrest. Despite his release, Mubarak still faces charges of corruption and complicity in the killing of demonstrators during the Arab Spring protests that toppled him in 2011. Mubarak's release has dismayed many Islamists who plan another mass protest to demand the reinstatement of Egypt's first democratically elected leader, Mohamed Morsi. They see the move as a sign that the military is rolling back the changes since the uprising.
Bradley Manning, the U.S. soldier who was jailed for 35 years this week for leaking secret U.S. documents to the WikiLeaks website, has revealed he wants to begin hormone therapy in order to live life as a woman and be known as Chelsea Manning. In a statement released to NBC's Today program on Thursday, Manning said she knew she was female since childhood and requested that she be referred to by her new name and use the feminine pronoun. The U.S. Army says, however, that it doesn't provide hormone therapy or sex reassignment surgery for a gender identity disorder. Manning's lawyer said his client would take legal action if the authorities refused to let her get hormone therapy in prison. There was panic and confusion on Wall Street Thursday when the Nasdaq ground to a halt for over 3 hours due to a technical problem. The shutdown, the longest in recent memory, affected trading in Google, Apple, Facebook, and more than 3,000 other U.S. firms between 12:14 p.m. and 3:25 p.m. Eastern Time. The exchange says the shutdown was caused by a problem distributing stock price quotes. Nasdaq is the second largest stock market by market capitalization in the world after the New York Stock Exchange.
A Japanese daily has reported all water drainage valves of a concrete barrier nearby the leaking tank of the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant were in fact opened when highly radioactive water leaked and drained into the ocean. This, according to the Tokyo Shimbun, which then said if all 24 valves had been closed, at least half of the 300 tons of contaminated water would have been contained within the barrier and allowed an earlier discovery of the water leak. Citing plant operator TEPCO, a number of Japanese media outlets on Friday said 2 additional tanks are suspected of leaking after authorities found 70 to 100 millisieverts per hour of radiation nearby the tanks in question. Earlier this week, Japan's nuclear agency said it would bump up the level of crisis 2 notches to 3 on an international scale for radiological releases. Shifting gears now, here's a case of genre mixing in the arts. Imagine the sound of traditional Korean pansori singing and Beethoven's sonatas. That's just one of the collaborated pieces taking place at Korea's only piano festival through this Saturday. Our cultural correspondent Park Ji-won takes us there.
This is a part of Jeokbyokga from Korea's storytelling and singing tradition called pansori. However, this pansori performance doesn't just feature the traditional Korean string music instrument called the haegeum, but also 4 pianists playing melodies from Beethoven sonatas. An Iho, who's been singing pansori for nearly 20 years, says he was amazed by the performance.
I think it's very interesting to see how these 2 totally different music genres, which are the pinnacle of their own spheres, can meet up and match so well.
This collaboration is one of the many concerts being held at this year's piano festival, Korea's only festival dedicated solely to the piano. The first started back in 2011. Pianist Park Jong-hoon came out with Thursday's collaboration concert featuring various artists from diverse genres, including dancers and jazz musicians.
I attempted a new approach for this concert. I set up 4 pianos, all placed at innovative locations at the center of the stage, and used visual effects. I wanted something contemporary with a fresh perspective.
During the one-week festival, Korea's most promising young pianists and its most respected share their talents and passion with audiences on center stage. The piano festival continues at Gyeonggi Arts Center through this Saturday. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Nice mix of the Korean and the piano, the pansori singing, very nice indeed. If you're lack of things to do this weekend, perhaps go there.
Well, certainly.
Yeah. Let's get a check on the weather with our weathercaster, Lee Ji-yeon, who's standing by at the Weather Center. Good afternoon to you, Ji-yeon.
Well, happy Friday, guys. Mark, what's your favorite fruits in Korea?
Oh.
Or how do you like them?
Well, I love fruit, as most people do, of course. Korean fruit is pretty delicious. Plums and peaches and pears and strawberries and tangerines, I believe, are coming back into season. They're especially delicious from Jeju Island in particular. But what's your favorite?
Well, let's see. Well, you already mentioned strawberries. I love strawberries. And they're so juicy and sweet, not to mention they contain a lot of vitamins. So for our good health. And how about you, Jian?
Well, my grandparents had a grape farm, so I've always had grapes around at home, so I love grapes. But sadly, this year most of grape farms are very concerned about their products due to the extreme weather condition we had this summer. So today's refreshing rainfall is really much needed for all of us. Well, right now the majority of peninsula is covered with the thick clouds all over, and even more rain clouds will moving down south, whereas the sun is trying to come out here in the central region. Well, because morning showers have let up here in the Seoul and the surrounding areas, but it's raining heavily down in south, and with the more rain clouds moving in, it can be heavy at times till the evening for southern provinces today. Now the weather condition for this weekend is looking pretty good. Daytime highs will be hovering 31 degrees Celsius for much of the country, so mostly sunny skies in store for central provinces this weekend, but more showers on tap for southern provinces till the evening hours on Saturday, which is a good news for down south, where regions have been suffering from serious droughts. So with the rain, today should be a transition day for the heat relief, and let's find out how cool it will get. Now the daytime highs for Seoul will climb up to 31 degrees Celsius, that's 88 degrees Fahrenheit, and Daegu will be much cooler at 30, while Gwangju and Busan will be even cooler at 29. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Dokdo and Mount Gyeongbang shouldn't be affected by rain today, whereas there will be more to come for Jeju and Daejeon. Now that's all for Korea, and here's the global forecast for viewers around the world.
And those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Thank you for joining us, and we'll be back next Monday at the same time at noon.